One of my students in the Value Pricing Academy, her name is Jessica Fox. She's a bookkeeper and she's had an extraordinary journey. And in this video, I'm going to share with you, she shares with you her journey and how she's applied some of the things that she's learned in the Value Price Academy, what she's learned about how to price bookkeeping services. So let's go listen to Jessica. She's going to tell you a story and she's going to share with you some thoughts on how she goes about pricing bookkeeping to get much better prices.
Thank you so much for having me. I see a lot of very familiar names, so I am happy to see you all. Those of you that don't know me, I started Florida Virtual Bookkeeper in 2016. Before then, I had been a corporate bookkeeper, so I was really good at the technical stuff, knew nothing about pricing. I didn't need to. When I decided to become a freelance bookkeeper in 2010, I had two clients. One tax accountant that kept me busy by giving me cleanup work and catch-up projects. So they told me how much they would pay me, and I would say, okay. So once again, I had no need to price. And the other one was a small nonprofit where I did it mostly out of the kindness of my heart. So I wasn't in it for the money, and I was really charging them pennies. When I officially hung my shingle in 2016, that's when I realized I really do not know how to be a bookkeeping business owner. So I thought I would just do what my previous tax accountant that I collaborated with did, charge by the hour. But because I was a new business owner, marketing is not really my thing. I used to say that sales was my Achilles heel, no, the past tense. I started to undercharge myself from the very beginning. And I did everything that Mark says you should not do, I did when I started. So I used to advertise on Craigslist, offering to price match. Can you believe that? In my website, I used to use keywords like affordable and cheap, thinking that that will get me SEO and make me competitive. But what I really did is that I had very slow growth for those first few years. And the clients that I was getting were not quality clients. I was making money, but I was also stressed out because I was not making enough money. And it reached a point where I felt like I wasn't being paid enough to make it worth my time to get out of bed and open a file. So something had to change. And that is when I decided to seek out and see, what are other people doing? There's got to be a better way. So I first came across Mark at around 2017. I started to subscribe to his email newsletter. I used to attend his free monthly webinars. I will catch his YouTube videos. And I started to get a pretty good idea that value pricing was the way to go. However, at that time, I had an unhealthy relationship with money. I had a poverty mindset I needed to overcome. So I wasn't really ready to take the leap and fully dive in. However, it did give me the motivation to make some changes. One of the things that I did is I transitioned into flat rate pricing. So while I wasn't value pricing right away, for those of you that have been doing this a while, and if you're new, you're gonna learn, value pricing is a journey. You're not gonna just decide one day, I am going to value price, take the stuff, implement it, and call it a day. It's a process that you need to internalize. And as you use it, you tweak it. In my opinion, it's never done. I have been implementing Mark's teachings for years and it gets better every day, but there's always new things to learn, things to tweak and improve. So at least I made that transition to menu pricing, which helped, but it still was a shortcoming because I was leaving so much money on the table. Yes, I created packages, but I was not creating them correctly. And then I was putting my prices on the website, which I've learned since is a big no-no. So then people had that anchor in their mind. By the time they contacted me, they had this expectation of what their price should be. which then made it harder for me to try to justify charging them a different rate. So while I did a lot and I got to implement a lot of things from the free materials, it wasn't until 2019 when Mark released the How to Price Bookkeeping course that things really changed in my business very quickly. I bought the course, and because still at that time, my business was very small, so it was a big investment, I made the commitment that if I am spending this much money on something, I've got to get my money back. So I carved the time out. That first session, it was live 90-minute sessions. So I booked it in my calendar so I could attend live, because I knew that if I didn't catch it live, it's easy to procrastinate in catching up with the recording. And I was taking notes, but I didn't stop at taking notes. I then made it a point to implement something. There was so much information, it was not realistic to run a business and implement everything immediately. But at least I will make one big change in my business from each session. I am happy to report that before I finished taking the course, the changes that I made paid for the course. So that was my big wow moment of, we're up to something here. This is what I should have been doing all along. And that gave me the motivation to keep making the changes. Now, I do recommend very strongly, if you haven't yet, log on to the Academy and access the How to Price Bookkeeper course, because there is a lot of very valuable information. Those materials are really worth their weight in gold. I will tell you as I go along which are the parts that make the biggest impact in my business. But what I recommend is go through everything. Everything is valuable. I'll just tell you the things that really were like the wow change makers for me. So by then, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on value pricing. However, I still felt like a lot of things I was just guessing as I went along. At least my rates were higher. I no longer had any resentment about getting out of bed to open a file, because I was compensated on a much better level than I was. But I knew that I had not reached the ceiling of what I could do. I knew that I could get more and that I could attract better clients. So when Mark announced the Bookkeeper's Price Academy last year, I was all shut up and take my money. As soon as I heard about it, I dropped what I was doing, ran to get my wallet, enter my payment information, because I knew this is what I needed. Before then, I was aware of the Value Pricing Academy, but it just felt like too much. There was too much information. I wasn't ready for all that information. So the VPA was a really nice transition for me. I saw it as my value pricing kindergarten until I was ready to graduate to Value Pricing Academy this year. So I hope that most of you will relate, at least with parts of my story, because you may have been there before, you may be there now. If there is one piece of advice that I can give you is, do not make the mistakes that I made, where I would listen to a webinar and Mark would say, do this. And I will have a little bit of a rebellious response of, yeah, it sounds nice, but I won't. Because really, I wasted a lot of time not implementing critical steps that would have gotten me further along my journey faster. So because I am a fully virtual firm, I actually do not print by brochures. So instead, what I did is I got a software that makes my PDF brochure looks like physical paper. So then I can, when I am meeting with the client via Zoom, I can turn the page and can start talking to them. So here's what I was talking about just a moment ago about the pain. All of our prospects come to us with some form of pain. It could be that it's tax time and they have no numbers to give to their tax preparer. It could be that they tried to do their own books and they were in over their head and made a mess of it. It could be that they tried to do their own books but got busy and they just can't keep up. So I will normally be asking the prospect in advance, get some information so that I'll know which parts from here I would focus on. Great. So now I'm going to move to effective pricing, and I am going to show you what is the process that I go through with a prospect to come up with their bookkeeping price. So I have a test client that I use for all of my testing. It's Zorro test client. For those of you that don't know, Zorro is fox in Spanish. So that's why it shows that name. It also puts it at the bottom of the list. And I really have not tapped into the power of keywords very well. So far, the only keyword that I have for this is the year end, but I do plan to extend on that further, but that is not relevant to today's content. So once I get the client basic information created, I then go into the questions. At this stage of the process, I will have already completed a diagnostic health check, so I will know the answer to some of these questions. So what I will usually do is that I will start the model right before our Zoom session, and I will fill in some of the first few questions. So that way, when I am meeting with the client, I am only asking those that I need their input. So by this point, I already know what industry they're in. I do not support all of these industries. I do have a somewhat of a niche, but I learned that if I do not include those industries here, I may come across a scenario where I may want to quote a prospect and I want that factor in.
So at the end of that video, you got a little sneak peek into a little bit more about the training that Jessica was going to go through in the Value Pricing Academy. And the great news is what I've done is created another video where she goes through step by step how she gives a fixed price using the effective pricing software. So you'll find a link to that video. I recommend you watch that next because you'll find the next part of what Jessica did in the training.